This story is about kindness, hope, and the power of passing it forward. A woman in deep trouble receives unexpected help from a stranger, changing her life in ways she never imagined. Years later, she gets a chance to help someone else in need, discovering how small acts can create a ripple of hope. Listen and let this touching story also help you improve your English. I used to believe that life was like a bus ride. You buy a ticket, you sit down, and you expect to reach your stop safely. But buses sometimes break down, take the wrong road, or throw you out in the rain. That was me standing outside in the storm without an umbrella. I had lost almost everything. My job was gone, my small apartment was too expensive, and my savings were so small that even bread felt like gold. People passed by me on the street every day. Some looked, some didn't. And I thought maybe I am invisible now. Still, I wasn't hopeless. A tiny spark inside me whispered, tomorrow will be better. But tomorrow often arrived with an empty stomach and a long list of worries. Back then, I didn't know that one simple act of kindness from a stranger would change my story. I didn't know that years later I would stand in the same place as that stranger, and that it would be my turn to give. It all began in the middle of winter. The city was cold, gray, and loud. People hurried to work with their scarves wrapped tight while I walked slowly, trying to make time last longer. I had just lost my job in a small shop, and the rent was waiting like a hungry wolf at the door. I counted my coins in my pocket. 2 for bread, 1 for tea, nothing more. The idea of asking someone for help felt shameful. I used to be the one giving advice to others. Don't worry, everything will be fine. Now those words sounded like a bad joke. I remember looking at a bakery window, the smell of fresh bread escaping through a tiny crack in the door. My stomach made a loud noise and a little boy next to me laughed. Your belly is singing, he said. I smiled, but inside I felt like crying. That was the moment I realized I was standing on the very edge of falling. And I didn't know what to do next. The next morning I woke up in my small, cold room. The heating had stopped 2 weeks earlier and I slept in my coat, hugging myself like a sad burrito. My landlord had already warned me twice. 1 more week without payment, he said, and you're out. I tried to find work. I walked from shop to shop asking if they needed help. Most just shook their heads, too busy to even say sorry. One woman looked at me kindly but said, maybe in spring. Spring felt like 100 years away. By afternoon the coins in my pocket were gone. I sat on a park bench, tired and hungry. I watched pigeons fighting over a piece of bread and thought even birds have better luck than me. I wanted to laugh, but instead tears came. I hid my face in my scarf so no one would see. That was when I heard footsteps stop right in front of me. I looked up, my eyes still wet. A man stood there holding a paper bag. He was not dressed rich, not poor either, just an ordinary man with kind eyes. He tilted his head a little like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Are you okay? He asked. Simple words, but they felt heavy. Nobody had asked me that in weeks. I wanted to lie, to say, yes, I'm fine. But my voice betrayed me. Not really, I whispered. He didn't laugh or walk away. Instead, he sat down beside me, opening the bag. The smell of warm food escaped and my stomach answered before I could. He noticed and smiled. I bought too much lunch, he said. Would you help me finish it? It was such a silly excuse I almost laughed. But I nodded. And just like that, my first meal in 2 days came from a complete stranger. He handed me half of a sandwich and a cup of hot tea. I held the cup between my hands, letting the warmth travel into my frozen fingers. For a moment it felt like life was not so cruel. We ate in silence at first. I tried to chew slowly, pretending I wasn't starving, but he noticed. Take your time, he said softly. The world won't run away. I almost choked on my tea because the line was funny but also true. Nobody had spoken to me with that kind of gentle humor in months. After a while he asked about my life. Not in a nosy way, more like he truly cared. I told him the short version. Job gone, rent problem, no family nearby. He listened without interrupting, just nodding. When I finished, he said something simple. This is not the end. It's just a hard chapter. Chapters change. I didn't know it yet, but those words would stay with me for years. When we finished eating, I thought that was it. A kind stranger, a shared meal, and goodbye. But before leaving, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. I don't usually do this, he said, almost shy. But something tells me you need it more than I do. He placed the envelope on the bench beside me. I froze. I can't take your money, I whispered. It's not charity, he replied. Think of it as an investment in your next chapter. I laughed nervously. What if I never pay it back? Then one day, he said, standing up, you'll pass it forward. To someone else who needs it. And just like that he walked away. No name, no address, nothing. Only the sound of his footsteps fading into the busy street. When I opened the envelope, I found enough money for rent and a few weeks of food. My hands shook. My heart did too. For the first time in a long time I felt hope. With that envelope I paid the landlord and bought groceries. Nothing fancy, just bread, rice and a little butter. But oh, how sweet that butter tasted after so many dry days. I even made a joke to myself. If happiness had a flavor, it would be warm bread with butter. The money also gave me time to search for work without panic. I printed a few resumes at the library, walked to offices, and even practiced smiling in the mirror so I wouldn't look desperate. It didn't always work. Sometimes my practice smile looked more like a stomachache. Finally, after 2 weeks, a small cafe offered me a job as a waitress. It wasn't much, but it felt like winning the lottery. I worked hard, learned how to balance 3 cups at once without spilling, and even became friends with the cook who taught me how to make soup from almost nothing. Each night I thought about the stranger. I never saw him again, but his words, "Pass it forward," echoed in my mind. I didn't know when or how, but I promised myself I would. Time passed as it always does. 2 years later my life looked completely different. I had moved to a slightly bigger apartment. Nothing fancy, but it had working heat and I no longer slept in my coat like a burrito. At the cafe I was no longer just a waitress. The owner trusted me with schedules, orders, even training new staff. Sometimes customers asked for me by name, saying, "She makes the best tea in town." It wasn't true, I just smiled more while serving it. I wasn't rich, not even close, but I could pay bills on time and still have a little extra for books or flowers on the table. My fridge was no longer empty and I could walk past a bakery window without feeling pain. And yet, there was a quiet space in my heart, waiting. Waiting for the moment when I could do for someone what that stranger once did for me. I didn't search for it. I just trusted life would bring it to me one day. It was late autumn, the kind of day when the air smells like wet leaves and old rain. I was leaving the cafe after a long shift, carrying a bag with leftover bread the cook always let me take home. Near the bus stop I saw a young woman sitting on the bench. Her coat was too thin for the weather, her shoes wet from puddles. She hugged herself, staring at the ground as if the world had forgotten her. Something inside me stopped. The picture was too familiar, like looking at my own past. I remembered the bench, the hunger, the silence. I hesitated for a moment. Maybe she didn't want help. Maybe she would refuse. But then I remembered the stranger's words. "Pass it forward." So I took a deep breath, walked over and said, "Excuse me, are you okay?" She looked up, her eyes red, and whispered the same words I once had, "Not really." I sat down beside her just like that stranger once sat by me. For a moment she looked surprised, maybe even suspicious. I opened my bag and showed her the bread. "I think I bought too much," I said, using the same silly excuse I once heard. Her lips curved into a weak smile. "Really?" "Completely true," I nodded, pretending to be very serious. "If I eat all of this, I'll roll down the street like a bread ball." She laughed a little, though it sounded broken. So it was a laugh. I handed her a piece of bread, and she accepted it with both hands as if it was something precious. We ate in silence, the sound of buses and footsteps around us. Then slowly she began to talk. About losing her job. About rent. About having no one nearby. Every word felt like déjà vu. I listened just as he once listened to me, nodding, not judging. And then I said softly, "This is not the end. It's just a hard chapter. Chapters change." After a while I reached into my pocket. I had saved a little money, enough to help with a week's rent or groceries. I hesitated, remembering how strange it felt to accept help myself. But then I saw her eyes, tired, worried, but still hopeful. "I have something that might help," I said, holding out the envelope. "It's not charity. Just a little push like someone once gave me." She blinked, unsure if she could take it. "I can't. I don't even know you," she whispered. "I didn't know him either," I said, thinking of the stranger from years ago. "Sometimes you just have to trust a little." She accepted it, her hands trembling. I smiled, remembering how the world had felt lighter that day for me. "One day," I added with a wink, "you'll pass it forward too." maybe in a cafe or on a park bench or even as a bread ball joke. Her laugh came again, this time more real, and I felt a warmth spreading inside me. We sat together for a long time eating bread and talking. I realized something amazing. I was no longer just helping her. I was healing myself too. Every word, every smile, every small laugh reminded me of the stranger who once saved me. She told me her dreams quietly, the ones she had almost given up. "I want to open a small shop," she said, "but I don't know where to start." I nodded. "Start small. One step at a time. You'll figure it out. Trust me." For the first time I saw hope flicker in her eyes. The same hope I had felt on that cold bench years ago. And then, as she laughed at one of my silly bread jokes, I felt it. Life really does come full circle. The stranger's gift had traveled from him to me and now from me to her. It wasn't just about money or food. It was about faith, kindness, and believing that chapters can change. Over the next few weeks I kept in touch with her. I helped her write resumes, taught her small budgeting tricks, and even showed her how to talk confidently in interviews. Each time she succeeded, I felt the same pride I remembered from my own first little victories. She found a small job at a bakery just like mine years ago, and slowly she began to smile more, walk taller, and believe in herself again. I watched her take her first steps toward independence, and it felt like watching a tiny flower bloom after a harsh winter. I realized I wasn't just her helper. I was her witness, her encouragement, her reminder that life can turn around. That stranger's kindness had rippled into both our lives, creating a chain I never expected. Sometimes life's small gestures, an envelope, a sandwich, a few words, carry the power to change everything. Years later, I sometimes walk past the same park bench where it all began. The trees have grown taller, the pigeons still fight over crumbs, and occasionally, a young woman sits there, cold and tired. I never know if I'll see her again, but I always remember. I realized something important. Kindness doesn't need recognition. The stranger never expected anything from me, and I never expected anything from her. Yet the world feels brighter when we help, even in small ways. Sometimes I smile to myself, thinking maybe somewhere that girl will pass it forward too, maybe in a cafe, maybe on a bench, maybe even with a silly bread joke. Life has a funny way of giving back what you once needed. And so, the chain continues, quietly, beautifully, and sometimes with just a little laughter along the way. One rainy afternoon years later, I walked into the cafe where I now worked occasionally as a manager. A new delivery man came in, dripping wet, shaking his umbrella. I smiled politely, ready to hand him a towel. Then he looked at me, and I froze. It was him, the stranger from the park bench years ago. Not much older, just familiar. He laughed softly, almost embarrassed. "I never expected to meet you again," he said. I blinked. You're real," I whispered. He grinned. "Real enough. I've been watching the chain. That girl you helped?" He passed it forward too. "The world is full of surprises." We laughed, a little awkwardly, a little joyfully. And in that moment, I realized life isn't just a series of broken buses. Sometimes it's a route that circles back to exactly where it should. The kindness had traveled farther than I ever imagined, and maybe, just maybe, it would never stop.